1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue podcast sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. It's the Friday show. We are live and I am your host, Ian Croll. And joining me in the studio today to talk all things Everton, we have the Echo's Everton FC correspondent home and away, Joe Thomas. Joe, how are things? All good?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Good. And we also have the Echo's Everton FC reporter, Chris Beesley. Chris, how are things? All good?
Okay, I'm home and away too, yeah.
Well, yeah, you are home and away. Sorry. I do apologise.
Yeah,
I do apologise.
We're just, we're looking at, aren't we? We're in our comfy travel gear here ahead of our long trip down to Suffolk. Yeah,
Chris hasn't put his driving gloves on just yet.
Yeah.
No, and he hasn't got
far off.
He hasn't got a suit on today either, as well. Have you noticed?
We're on the road, yeah. So, you know.
Well, we've cleared that up. Chris is home and away as well, so we're all good. Who's doing the drinking? Who's doing the driving?
Well, we split the driving.
Okay.
We don't really split the drinking, do we?
No, we're very professional.
That's it. Got to be, haven't you, these days? never off duty. So
Save the drink until after at the feet, maybe. Cynical, aren't I? Cynical.
Right.
Okay, well, today's agenda, it is the Ipswich preview show, so that means score predictions, lineup predictions, and general chit-chat on how Everton can get a win at Portman Road on Saturday. So we've got all that to come, plus plenty more. The usual housekeeping, obviously we are live, so please drop us a question, drop us a comment on the stream, and we will read them out as we go. And also hit the bell and give us a thumbs up, give us a like, and if you haven't already, then please subscribe to the channel. Might as well get straight into it then, Joe. We'll start with you. Injury news, player availability. The big one, Jarrad Branthwaite, Sean Dyche said at his press conference, a call will be made within 24 hours whether he will be available or not. So obviously a clear message that he might not be 100% fit. Would you risk him?
well, I guess it depends where he's up to, really, doesn't it? Like Dyche has said that it's not injuries now that are holding him back. It's general fitness. So he's happy with where he is in terms of his recovery from the quad issue that ruled him out of the Newcastle game. Where he isn't sure about him is apparently he's only recently come back, and is he match fit? How close is he to match fitness? And do you have to, obviously you do have to be a little bit careful about bringing a player back a little bit too early, which, albeit he picked up the quad injury in training, not in the Palace game, and although it was a different injury to the groin injury that kept him out for all those months over the summer, obviously the general wear and tear and pressure of his body of returning to football after just one game in the under-21s probably had some sort of impact on his body and breaking down, and not then for being able to play against Newcastle. So I think that obviously it depends on what he's seeing, but I wouldn't risk it. I think we have to have a long-term strategy towards some of these. Obviously he took that view with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. There's no doubt that Jarrad Branthwaite starts if he's fit, and if he's 85% and he's just missing the match fitness that he'll only get by playing matches, you probably bring him in as a hope of trying and get him up to speed as soon as possible, because we've got a big run of fixtures, as we've discussed in previous podcasts, coming up, and Everton need to kind of be at their best for them, I think. So I wouldn't, if it's a 50-50, I wouldn't risk it. If it's a 60-40, I wouldn't risk it. If it's 70-30, 80-20, then at that point I'm probably going into he makes a big enough difference to this side for it to be worth it. If it is just a case of, as I say, finding his route to that mythical Dyche fitness that we talk about, which you can probably only actually get if you're playing games. So yeah, that's what I'd look to do. But yeah, Branthwaite decision will be made on Friday. They were speaking on. Mykolenko is back. That's big news. That's very good news, because it certainly means it means that there's less pressure on trying to find the answer to the right back sort of problem, which is also another issue. Coleman looks like he's in contention. Whether he starts or not, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be that surprised if we saw Ashley Young out there, especially with Mykolenko being back on the left. Coleman's been out for a fair few weeks as well. Obviously missed international duty with Ireland over the course of the past fortnight. Again, someone who's not played for the under-21s. So, again, just how fit is he? I don't know. But obviously Patterson is out, and we know that James Garner's out as well. That was the big news of this week, really, is Tim Iroegbunam and James Garner. James Garner both picking up what look to be serious injuries. Iroegbunam a foot issue, looks like it's going to be weeks. Garner's a back issue, which is still to be assessed. Dyche doesn't think they'll know the full extent of it until next week. The big concern, I think, for that is that when Garner had a very slow start to his Everton career, and part of that was because he suffered a quite serious back injury. Just as he was getting to a point where he was going to be match fit, and I think he played one of his first starts was in that Bournemouth week, that horrible week of 2 trips down to Bournemouth where Everton lost them both, and I think he did something in one of those games, or in the aftermath of one of those games, and that was a back injury that kept him out for a good period of time. So hopefully it's separate and not linked, but obviously if he's only a young lad, if it's a second serious back injury at this age, then that'll be a concern going forward.
Okay, Chris, I mean, same question, really. I mean, Joe's absolutely spot on. We've got a huge run of games coming up, so I think I would be of the same opinion as Joe, maybe not to risk Branthwaite for tomorrow if he's not 100% fit. We know Keane and Tarkowski did okay against Newcastle, to be fair. I don't think that there's no secret with regards to that. But what is your initial thoughts on Branthwaite's fitness and risking him?
Well, I was just surprised a bit, really, how these injuries were dressed up in terms of. At first, I think Sean Dyche said he was behind some other players, and then he was at pains to explain that that the player was actually okay now. So he made a specific point of pointing that out and trying to clarify whatever. And we're at it's been a strange one with Branthwaite where they've been all through the summer and then going into the season, and then, like as Joe said, Tim Iroegbunam and James Garner were brought into the equation later on in the conversation after another question. So it was strange, really. I just hope he's all right and it isn't anything major. Yeah, it's probably one like Joe says. If he's more or less there, you'd want it in there, because as well as Michael Keane did play, Michael Keane I thought was really good against Newcastle. I think a lot of Michael Keane's problems are he's just not Jarrad Branthwaite, who's a potentially generational talent. So if he's almost there, I probably would bring him back in. But if it is less so, then hopefully they can do a job without him. I'm just concerned as well that just the general injuries around the club. There's so many at the moment, and like you said, Iroegbunam and Garner now picking up new knocks. Hopefully, as Joe says, Mikolenko's back in there. That's a big one, because there's no other natural cover at left back other than Ashley Young going over there. But we need to sort of get rid of all these niggles and these problems that keep coming in, because it's a big concern, really. It's
a really interesting one. So I wrote a story at the beginning of the international break saying about how Everton had actually got to the point where they were starting to review things like what they did over pre-season, the beginning of this season, training routines and things like that, to work out why they had so many injuries at the start of this season already. Dyche says he hasn't seen, he says it's unusual for him in his career. I mean, I think if you look at some of the injury lists of some of the other Premier League clubs, likes of Brentford, likes of Brighton, Arsenal as well, actually quite a lot of clubs have got quite serious injury lists. The difference being that for lots of reasons that we've discussed on here in the past, Everton just have a much smaller squad than us, so you feel it a lot more. But like if people read the piece that I wrote on Thursday afternoon after coming back from Finch Farm, it seemed as just another wonderful irony in Everton going into an international break looking for answers over why they're getting so many injuries, and then coming out of it with 2 players who weren't on international duty having potentially serious injuries. And I think that is a bit of a concern. I think these lads have been playing. Obviously, there were a lot of first-team players available over the course of the last fortnight. Not all of them went away, but we did see the under-21s and some of the younger ones of the under-21s cohort being promoted to the first team to help beef up the numbers for training. And you kind of do think, well, a back injury and a foot injury that could both be weeks, if not longer. Like how have they materialised, and that is certainly something I'm noticing in like when I'm speaking to supporters and on social media or in day-to-day conversation, and that more and more people are asking me about, and I think it's something that Dyche is being asked more about, but trying to work out what the situation, because he's very protective about what he does in pre-season. He has a history of starting slow with teams, but I think his his view is, if he works them hard on the fitness front over the course of the summer, that in the long run you see the benefits of that over the course of the season, and maybe he's got a point in relation to that. But injuries have been a problem for Everton this season. They have contributed to what has been a poor start to the season, a frustrating start to the season, and it looks like they're going to undermine Everton going into this next crucial period of the season as well. Hopefully they've got enough to overcome it. Like I don't think either Iroegbunam or Garner are in Dyche's first 11. We can have a conversation about whether Garner is the best right back at the club. That he may well be the best right back at the club, but I think if Seamus Coleman's fit, then I think he probably starts. But it's less about, when you've got a squad this small, it's less about that starting 11. It's more that final half an hour of games, isn't it? We've spoken about this in relation to Dyche and the substitutions he does and doesn't make. These days now, you almost have 3 periods of a game. You have that first hour. Then how often have we looked at that dugout on the hour mark and we've seen someone like Ireola or, another, Thomas Frank, another mid-table Premier League manager, make a fleet of changes to completely freshen their side up on the hour mark, and then they'll do the same again for the last 10 minutes with whatever stoppage time comes on. Everton just can't do that.
I think there is room. I'm not maybe saying there's not room for like five changes, but he's definitely got room for like 2 or 3, which he's failed to do. Certainly over the first opening couple of games of this season. But he's changed that though over the past couple.
He's been more proactive recently. But I mean, my comment is more just in the sense that obviously Everton more often than not are coming up against teams that are better equipped to deal with those different phases of the game. Yeah. And whereas I think it's easy to maybe look at Garner and Iroegbunam and say, with where Everton have been this season, and if, say, Coleman is back fit, maybe that isn't as big a loss for Everton as it could be. Certainly not as big a loss as, say, someone like a Branthwaite or a Calvert-Lewin was to go down. Yeah. I do think that it's that kind of cumulative impact. It's too fewer senior players that are available on the bench as an option for that last half an hour or that last 10 minutes. And it's even more pressure, especially with these two being centre midfielders. Obviously, you've got Oral Mangala, you've got Abdoulaye Doucouré, and you've got Idrissa Gueye there. Well,
is he injured?
All 3 of those are fit.
Oh, sorry, I thought Gueye was injured as well.
But what I'm saying is that all 3 of those are fit, but Idrissa Gueye is in his mid-30s. He's just had, just played 2 games for Senegal. Is a player who's had repeated calf injuries over the last 12 months. Abdoulaye Doucouré is only 31, but he's had repeated hamstring issues over the last 12 months. You're putting a lot of pressure again on these players to... you're asking them not just to play that 60, which is what maybe centre midfielders and a lot of other clubs are being asked to do, or maybe that's 75. You're asking them to play 90 plus 5 Saturday. Yeah. And I think that's the problem that we saw last season with Dwight McNeil and Jack Harrison. Dyche became so reliant on them, and both of them started the season with injuries that we really saw it by January. They both just looked knackered, and you could see why, because there were no fresh legs that. For some reason, Dyche didn't have the trust in Danjuma, and obviously Dobbin was the only other option. He was a youngster, did well, but still a youngster. You just see that cumulative impact, and we're in a big period now. We're going to have a difficult period in December with the fixtures that come up. Certainly going to be an intense fixture, and then that's only the first half of the season. Into the January when the fixtures might get a bit better, there's a little bit of a break that helps. But again, if the players that have been fit all the way through are knackered because they've been playing 95 minutes week in, week out, then again, that's something that you have to have in mind.
No, without a doubt, and I don't disagree with anything that you've said, to be honest. I mean, I guess we're a bit lucky in the sense that with Garner and Iroegbunam now going to be long-term injuries, Chris, we've still got, as Joe mentioned, we've still got 3 options there. Okay, they're not maybe not ideal in terms of age and fitness, fitness injuries themselves, but I guess we've got 3 solid options there who could fill a void.
Yeah, it's the one area where they do have strength in numbers, don't they? Probably why we saw James Garner getting more minutes at right back anyway, but partly not just that he's helping out because that's been the movable feast all season, but the fact that there's so much competition in the engine room anyway, so it'll be interesting, like what Joe says, whether just how much he ends up playing right back and how much centre midfield going forward. But I think the question is just what's the right combination for Everton in the middle, because I think we were discussing this yesterday. Tim Iroegbunam started the season really well in terms of catching the eye, and he did well pre-season, probably ahead of everyone's expectations, probably even his own. But then for all those sort of easy on the eye moments, it became a question of was the balance right, and Everton weren't winning games, and they do seem to have sort of looked more balanced in that area in recent weeks. But I think there was one. I mean, we were all asked. There was 2 different things. You and Joe had picking your best 11 earlier this week, and then Joe and I also did it in a written form with Matt Jones. And I don't know, I think I discussed this last week in terms of, is there such an actual thing as a best 11 now in terms of, horses for courses and different tactical combinations against different opponents? And it'll probably be the one area where we possibly see the most sort of fluctuations forever in the centre midfield in terms of those different combinations for different matches, because there is a decent number of options in there when everyone is available.
It's been a while since Chris Beesley used the phrase horses for coursing in a podcast.
At least a week.
We're getting a few questions on Patterson, Joe.
Yeah.
So I'll just read one out. I mean, Emma EFC, who regularly contributes to the stream, is asking, but Jeanette Rainford says, Patterson has played for the under-21s, so why isn't he fit for the first team? Is it just that Dyche doesn't like him?
It's a really good question, and it's one that I think we'll probably learn a little bit more over the coming weeks. He hasn't just played for the under-21s; he's played 3 games for them now, and before the international break, he played 2 games in 5 days, against Reading and against Wolves. So if his workload is clearly intensified, and I saw him when he was driving out of Finch Farm yesterday. He's had the international break on top of that, so it's 200. Well, he didn't play all 90 minutes, but that's 3 games, a fortnight training with the first team. You'd think he'd probably be there or thereabouts. Now, I mean, there is probably, I think, with Patterson, there's the legacy of other injuries that you have to be concerned about. This is a player that he's a young lad, but his body has failed him on multiple occasions already. He's finished, I think, 3 seasons with Everton now, and he's finished every single one of them injured. So that has been a concern. Obviously, he needed surgery on his hamstring after it looked innocuous at the time. Didn't even start that game. I think it was the 6-0 drubbing at Stamford Bridge where he came on late on and then had to leave the pitch because of the hamstring issue. So there is probably an element of the fragility of his body and trying to find a way, and we saw this with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I think, a little bit under Dyche at the beginning of last season, trying to find a way to build him back stronger. And I think that there's a difference between how you approach someone like Patterson, who has had repeated injuries and quite dynamic injuries as well, obviously, to things like hamstrings, when we know that pace is a part of his game, bombing forward and things like that. Well, you have to have a bit in mind of the long term and how you're going to try and build him up for so he can actually have a career in football where this doesn't keep happening. With Branthwaite, obviously, again, another young player, but he hasn't had a long history of serious injuries. That was his first one. The groin injury wasn't felt to be a particularly serious one. It's just a bit of a complicated one, which is why it kind of takes a bit of time to get back. Speaking to people in the game, obviously we know that Jarrad Branthwaite, one of the theories that I kind of saw emerge towards the end of the transfer window was perhaps that nobody moved for Jarrad Branthwaite, or perhaps Manchester United didn't put in a higher bid for Jarrad Branthwaite because he was injured at the time. There's concerns over that. My understanding is that the groin injury wasn't something that would have seen him kind of fail a medical at the time. It wasn't something that, obviously, wouldn't have been fit to play right then, but it wasn't something that anyone would have had long-term concerns over. It's just about kind of edging him there towards towards full fitness. And I think he had a little bit of a setback at the back end of the summer. There was a hope that he might be available for, if not the start, then very close to the start of the season. That didn't quite materialise, as we've seen. So I think with Branthwaite, I think they've been a little bit more kind of confident with him because he doesn't have the track record that Patterson has. But even with that, you can see the quad injury that kept him out of Newcastle wasn't the same as the groin injury. But Everton, again, on that, perhaps got burnt a little bit by perhaps bringing him back a little bit early. So you can see it with different players. Separate to that with Patterson, I do also think the difference between, say, Patterson and Branthwaite is we know that Branthwaite is first choice when he's available. Patterson, there are huge question marks, I think, over how much Dyche rates him and where he fits into Dyche's plans. Dyche has, even when Nathan Patterson has been fit, Dyche has done an awful lot to not play him. How many times have we been there an hour and 15 minutes before kick-off, and you're sitting there and you think, well, Coleman's out and Garner's probably going to play in the middle, so this has got to be Patterson's time, and then you end up and it's Ashley Young, or I think that, this was a long time ago, and this was in Dyche's opening weeks, but I remember the 0-0 draw at Crystal Palace in the season that ended with Bournemouth, and Dyche played Mason Holgate at right back over a fully fit Nathan Patterson. I remember asking him after, and this was a game where Jordan Ayew tore Holgate to shreds. He got 2 yellow cards, got sent off. I remember asking what the thought process behind that decision was at the time, and then he was saying, he was basically said Holgate's distribution from deep is better, which just felt like a bit of a strange answer at the time. Sticking a square peg in a round hole there just to try and for some kind of more complicated tactical reason that. Well, it got shown up because Holgate, got sent off and had a terrible game, even though Everton kept a clean sheet in that. So I do think that there is a big question over Patterson and whether Patterson will ever be a serious part of a Dyche side. Obviously, he needs to get back to full fitness in order to do that. Hopefully, he does. He should get the opportunity at some point this season if he is fit, because we know that as good as Coleman is, injuries do catch up with him. And we know that obviously James Garner faces at least a short period out, at least a period of time out now. And there's no Holgate in the squad, there's no Ben Godfrey in the squad. So whilst there's Ashley Young there, you would think Patterson will probably get an opportunity if he is fit. It's up to him to take it. But that's going to be an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it in the summer, and if say for instance Dyche, if Dyche doesn't get a new contract at Everton and a new manager comes in, I'd be really interested to see whether we saw a continuation of it, which suggests that maybe there's a belief at the club that the player isn't as good, or the injuries have taken an impact on him, or it's something else, or whether or not someone else comes in and gives him a lease of life. Because Lampard played him a fair bit when he could. Obviously Coleman was injured, but he started the season that he started with Patterson. Patterson played well. He had a good start to the season, played really well in the 0-0 draw against Liverpool, and but then injuries always seem to catch up with him at the wrong time.
Yeah, no, I mean, just sticking with it then, Chris, we've had a comment here from Danny Morehouse. Patterson isn't playing again under Dyche because it's personal, since Dyche acted like the big man and Patterson didn't like the response. Oh, sorry, and didn't like Patterson's response. Would you, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I think that it's all well and good that we can, we discussed this, didn't we, in the pod with Gav on Monday. It's all well and good debating whether he's good enough or not. I genuinely just don't think Dyche fancies him. The only thing really that's changed over the course of the past couple of months is that Patterson's been injured, and that's the only reason he's not been in the team. But as Joe mentioned there, it's a long season. He could get in, barring injuries, etc., over the next couple of months. But is it a case of Dyche just doesn't fancy him, and obviously the incident that happened in Portugal a couple of months ago?
Well, I don't know about that particular incident. I mean, as Joe says, it goes back a lot longer than before that. He wasn't picking him anyway. As we mentioned last season, Godfrey for a good old chunk of the second half of the season was in their natural centre back. For whatever reason, it seems that he just, for all that Sean Dyche in public says all the right things about Nathan Patterson, the proof's in the pudding in the terms of his selection or non-selection, in that he's missed a lot of games for injury, but there's been many games, as Joe said, when he is available and he's not picked him anyway. It may well be a case of if there's another manager there next season that he gets an opportunity he won't get under the current regime. But it's on the one hand, like you say, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Dyche could feel like really vindicated in terms of how he's got him fit and firing again. The factory reset, as the player called it, went on to play 39 games, all comps last season. But all these injuries for Patterson, it just seem odd that we're still being told that he's very much on the road to recovery and needs his match programme. So does that mean more under 21 outings rather than a senior call up? I think we discussed it the other day. I think there are serious doubts while Sean Dyche is Everton manager, of just how much of a look in Nathan Patterson's going to get when he is fit.
Okay, let's move on to Ipswich then. Obviously, big game on Saturday, Joe. First meeting between the sides in any competition since 2002.
I was there. Matt Holland scored for Ipswich at Goodison. It was their penultimate Premier League win. I was hoping, surely it's not their last Premier League win. They've won one since then against Middlesbrough. So lovely memory for you there.
2-1. Do you know that was the score?
0-0 at Portman Road, was it?
Well, I've got 2-1 down. Goodison Park, sorry. I don't know.
Yeah.
Portman Roads. Yeah, sorry, the opposite fixture. So that was the last time they played each other. I mean, what are your thoughts, Joe? Because they're still yet to win. 4 draws, obviously 4 points, but they sit 17th in the table, 1 place below us. And to be honest, some of those draws are actually good points when you think about it. They played Villa, Brighton, and even Fulham, draws against them, who, those 3 teams you'd say have had a good start to the season. So
two of the defeats came against Liverpool and Manchester City.
Exactly.
So I think perspective is an interesting one here, because I think it's easy. I looked at that and I've looked at their fixtures and their results so far, and I've gone, this is a newly promoted side that's shown a degree of resilience. They've drawn more games than they've lost. They haven't got that win yet, but they've picked up some useful points against sides that Everton have really struggled against. So you wonder if they've actually had a good start to the season. They've laid a foundation, and now that from their perspective the fixture list might improve, that they might hope to kind of push on from that. But I don't think we can underestimate the impact that the defeat at West Ham had on them before the international break. They went to West Ham thinking that because of those results they might be able to get a result, and West Ham might be able to get a point. They conceded early and they lost comfortably in that game, and I think that really damaged the psyche and the confidence of the club. I was speaking to one of the reporters that covers Ipswich yesterday about this, expecting him to be quite buoyant and quite bullish, and instead actually, whilst obviously they know it's going to be tough in first season back in the Premier League, and this is a club that was only in League 1 2 years ago, doesn't have a Premier League infrastructure. It's not like, say, a Leicester or Southampton that only had 1 year in the Championship after having prolonged periods in the Premier League. This is a side that's been out of the top flight for decades, so it's always going to be tough. But I was a little bit surprised by how kind of dejected they were as a result of that West Ham result. So I think that they're perhaps a little bit more vulnerable than we think. Obviously, we know Portman Road is going to be absolutely rocking tomorrow. We know that they probably go into this fixture very similar to how we go into this fixture, where it's like over the start of the season, not quite sure what to make of it, but now's the time to push on. I think with their fixtures coming up, and that's what they would see this. Everton at home would have to be seen as a winnable game for them if they want to stay in the Premier League. Yeah. Similarly, if Everton want to not just stay in the Premier League, but push on into mid-table and have a season where we're not having sleepless nights come April, then this is a game that Everton needs to be looking at to win. So it's going to be interesting. I think there is more pressure on both of these sides and managers than we might actually kind of automatically assume there would be, given how early it is in the season and how both of them have had complicated starts the season that are complicated to assess, rather than say like outright terrible starts. So I think both fan bases, both dugouts are going into this game still looking for answers over quite where they are this season, what they need to do, and what progress is possible for them. It'll be interesting to see if anyone gets any answers tomorrow. But this is a game that I think Everton have to go into. Haven't won away from home since December, have they? So that game against Burnley. Had some alright games, away performances since then. Obviously the one after that, Tottenham, they lost, but that was a very good performance, wasn't it? They were unlucky against Arsenal last day of the season. Yeah. But Everton need to. I think Everton need to address that. This would be a good place to start. I think they could really do with winning one of these or Southampton. At least I think they probably need. They won't get any better opportunities to break that duck and start to improve in the away form again than the next 2 away games. As we discussed earlier on in the week, this is a big run of fixtures for Everton. Like, obviously no easy games, blah blah blah, and Fulham at home next week will be difficult because they've had a good start, and like I tend to say, Fulham tend to be Dyche's kryptonite, I think, with Everton, but this little run of games is a really good opportunity for Everton, and they have to start taking them.
Fingers crossed. Chris Zephyr says, "Where's Chris Beesley's shirt and tie? Very disappointing."
Yeah, like I said, we're on the road, aren't we? So, I'm glad that they have those certain expectations for me, and it's similar to the expectations we should have for Everton, really, as Joe said, going into this game. I suppose on the one hand, Ipswich, they spent a lot of money, and Dyche referenced that. I don't think he was making excuses. He was just talking in facts. For a newly promoted club, they really have sort of thrown the money about, haven't they? And tried to make sure that they have as good a chance as any of staying in the Premier League. But I think when I was speaking to Michael Ball earlier in the week, in terms of the expectations, he said, no, come on, Everton need to be going. They're saying, we're Everton Football Club. Ipswich have done terrifically well getting themselves back up there, but yeah, it's one. We talked about these games in isolation. I said they're all winnable, but like Joe says, they need to start delivering now in that respect, and get that monkey off the back, that first Premier League away win in 10 months, because it's time to deliver, and it's a very important period for Everton coming up, but they need to sort of get into those good habits quickly now for those games on the horizon after this one.
Someone's taking me question, which I'll put to you again, Chris. ITFC Bible. Any Ipswich players you see as threats? Anyone that you think stands out? Or
they've spent a lot, haven't they? It was the one that I thought was interesting. I don't know how he started, to be honest, but in terms of Calvin Phillips was the one that we know that there was genuine interest from Everton. We had that stood up, and although it's only a loan deal, I think they paid a lot of money to get him out of Manchester City. He never had any sort of future there. He was a player who I felt could actually have done well at Everton. Obviously, he came in before they ended up getting Oral Mangala on deadline day. A player who Sean Dyche is a long-term admirer of, and a player who'd obviously been played a lot of times for England and done well at Leeds United, and his move to City has just been a disaster, really. And obviously the Pep Guardiola weight comments, and then a bit of an underwhelming loan spell at West Ham United last season. So he was one who I thought, if he had come to Everton, he might have actually been able to sort of revive his career under Dyche. So it was really intriguing, really, the fact that Ipswich were able to get in a real coup for them. I must admit, I've not been following him since. I'm not too sure how he's been getting on, but he'd be certainly the one I'd be keeping an eye on.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that you referenced the summer there, Chris, and Everton and Ipswich were in the same ballpark. They were both late into the running for Jadon Philogene from Hull until he went to Aston Villa, because they enacted the clause they had because he'd come from their youth system originally. Armando Broja was someone that was on the verge of Ipswich but ended up coming to Everton, and obviously Calvin Phillips was someone that was coveted by both sides as well, and that probably gives us an indication as just to kind of where Everton have been. Where they've fallen to, obviously, in recent years. Ipswich are upwardly mobile. They were taken over and well run, and they had that money to spend. But that's probably worth bearing a little bit in mind tomorrow when we go into perhaps some of these squads are a little bit more closely matched than we'd think. Liam Delap is their goal scorer, and he's had a good start to the Premier League season. So I think that he's probably their biggest threat. He's got a couple of goals, or I think he might have 4 goals already. And I think that, in terms of expectations, again, a lot depends on probably whether Branthwaite starts and what version of Branthwaite we get. If we got a 75%, an 85%, or a 90+%, because we know that if Branthwaite's on top form, well, we know if Branthwaite's available, then he's a top centre back, and we also know that the dynamic between him and Tarkowski works particularly well. You could end up in a situation there where Everton start tomorrow and they've got Mikalenko, Branthwaite, Tarkowski and Coleman across the back four, and many would probably argue that might be Dyche's first choice back four. And I think expectations, if that was the starting lineup, would be far different to, say, for instance, if they go and it's Mikalenko, Tarkowski, Keane and Young. At that point you're probably thinking maybe a point isn't the worst result. So I guess we'll have to see on that front.
Moving on then. You kind of touched on it there, Joe, but a big thing is obviously being made about the defence, and it has been over the past couple of weeks because we haven't been at full strength. But I think we've talked about this previously, where I've suggested that I think it's a little bit unfair on the defence, even though it has been makeshift from times why we've conceded so many goals. It's a lot of it's down to the midfield. I know we've just discussed there about how we've got quite a lot of numbers in the midfield, but really, what quality do we actually have in that middle of the park? Certainly as like the number 6 or as the holding and stuff like that. The glaring issue for me, that whether people have seen it or not, is why we're conceding so many goals is possession and the lack of that we have during games. Just read this out. 40% possession against Palace, 32 against Newcastle, 41 against Leicester, 26 against Southampton in the Cup, 27 against Villa, and 46 against Bournemouth. Now, I could understand potentially against the likes of Newcastle, Leicester, Villa, because Southampton, we know, play possession-based football. Villa, you would expect them to have more of the ball, and even Newcastle. The rest, I just don't get. I know you don't win games by just having the huge amounts of possession, but the pressure that we allow ourselves to be under by the lack of possession that we have is just so glaring. So what does Sean Dyche do, if anything? Does he address the lack of possession issue? Does he even want to address it? Is that how he wants to play?
I think you can divide it into two elements. I don't think the possession stats in particular are useful to the debate, because I think if you look at the broader numbers, Everton were hard to beat last season. They kept more clean sheets than anybody other than Arsenal last season. They had some particularly good wins. The main one, the first one that springs to mind, obviously being the derby win against Liverpool, which, albeit they wouldn't have won the possession stats in that game, was an emphatic win. They were comfortably the better side on that. So I don't think the possession necessarily equates to better results. And even then, within those numbers, 26% against Southampton might not be an enjoyable watch, but I think Jesper Lindstrom missed 2 1-on-1s in that game. Everton could easily have won that with what they did with the possession. Against Villa, they had those 2 goals. Dominic Calvert-Lewin had had a big 1-on-1, didn't he, as well, and hit the bar as well. Bournemouth, they're 2-0 up going into the 87th minute. So, I think you can read too much into that. It's less about how much possession you have, and I think it's more about what you actually do with the possession that you do get. And I think the big issue for Everton is, and I think this is where I come to agree with you, is that they haven't found a way to kind of build sustainable attacks. The ball goes up to Dominic Calvert-Lewin and it comes straight back. He's being isolated up top. And he's not getting the numbers in and around him to help support him, help Everton carry the ball forward, and even if it's not with any end product, to at least get the ball out wide, get the ball to the byline, win set pieces, which we know Everton are very dangerous at, or at least just relieve pressure on the player. That's why I like the idea of having Iliman and Dye in a central role, so that he can have more of an impact on the game. Everton have been at their best this season when wherever he's been on the pitch, they've played through Iliman and Dye. It happened in the first half against Leicester, happened in the first hour against Bournemouth, and it happened in the second half against Crystal Palace. They saw Iliman and Dye out and they played through him. But if you have him on the left, it's far easier for him to get isolated than it is when he's in the middle. And when he's in the middle, obviously he's someone that can go both ways with his feet, someone that can beat a play, someone that can play with his back to goal, which are attributes I don't think Dwight McNeil possesses to the same calibre that he does. I think Dwight McNeil can do a very good job at the left, on the left side of midfield. I think Dwight McNeil can... I don't think there's anybody else on that side, and there are probably few other players in the Premier League that you want running onto a ball 25 yards out, facing the opposition goal with it on its left foot. Dwight McNeil's a master of that. He's in the running for September Player of the Month because of it, and he deserves to be there. He has been responsible for the best moments of Everton's season so far. But I think it's trying to work out that attacking dynamic and who precisely goes where, because in Iroegbunam, you've got someone who we can see is a bit more deliberate in possession. Mangala isn't combative number 6, and he's not a box-to-box midfielder. What he is, he's a metronome that kind of hoovers up the ball.
What a word.
And he hoovers up the ball and he just feeds it full back, out wide, number 10. That's where it's going. You retain possession. But you have to give him the players around them in space that are willing to make runs and find space in order for him to be able to get it. And that's what Everton have kind of struggled to do, I think, so far this season. So for me, it's less about... I think that Sean Dyche has a track record of Everton has shown that he can get the results that Everton need without having to have lots of the ball, but it's what you do with it.
Yeah.
And that's something that they're really struggling with this season so far.
Yeah, it's almost when we've had our moments, it's just been pockets of play that have lasted less than 30 seconds to a minute. Yeah. Not even a counter-attacking style type of thing. It's more of a Dwight McNeil magic moment. Just sticking with that then, Chris.
Yeah.
I don't think that we've got, other than maybe James Garner, a really naturally gifted ball-playing midfielder. Someone who could take the ball off the keeper, turn, look for the players that Joe's talking out there. Maybe Mangala. I don't know. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the passing's been an issue for a long time now. I agree with Joe in that, in terms of, I think under Dyche, you're probably going to have fewer possession in the opposition in nearly every game you play, and whether that's win, lose or draw, that's just seems to be the case. It'd be interesting if you had a Dyche team come up against another Dyche team. What happened then? I don't know.
Who's paying to watch that?
I don't know I don't know who that would be, who the closest equivalent would be, but. Yeah, and as Joe says, it's what to do with it. But in terms of retaining the ball, it's a problem. I think even going back to Rafael Benitez, he infamously came out with it, said we're not good on the ball. So it's going back 2 managers there. So yeah, it's a long-standing problem. But I think the crux of it, as we said, is not, they're never going to necessarily dominate possession. It's what they're doing while they're in there. But it becomes an issue when you just can't alleviate that opposition pressure and it keeps coming back at you. That's when you've got a problem.
You're gonna have to get your brains working for this. Who's the last quality midfield number 6 that you think we've had?
Well, he's not number 6, but in terms of ability on the ball, Amadou Onana.
Okay.
Like in terms of but obviously it depends on the job that you're asking him to do.
Okay.
If Amadou Onana is playing in a setup where he's encouraged to take the ball, to come deep, take the ball off Pickford, and has runners around him that looking for an expansive pass, then that's something that Amadou Onana can do. But obviously not in the setup that Dyche had him playing in.
You're probably right. I was gonna go as far back as Gareth Barry, to be honest.
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else. I think Joe's right, but
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone else. Okay, well, we will go to predictions and team selector. Just so everyone knows that I put a post in the YouTube community page of a vote who's going to win, Everton or Ipswich, and so far 69% think Everton are going to win, 14% think Ipswich are going to win, and 17% think it's going to be a draw.
We have had some Ipswich fans on, haven't we? We had a comment there from an Ipswich fan. So,
Did they?
Yeah, was it the ITFC, presumably?
Oh, right, is that what that
he
is?
Must have been an Ipswich fan, yeah.
Fair enough. I was oblivious to that,
Yeah.
Welcome to the Royal Blue.
Yeah, the one who
Everton,
was asking me about which Ipswich players were going to cause problems, and I was thinking of, was it Jason Dezelle or Mick Mills or something like that? No.
Makes sense. Welcome to the Royal Blue YouTube channel. Okay, well, I'll tell you, we'll do our team selection first, and then we'll go to predictions before we move on. Do you want to go first? Bear in mind, you picked your best team on Wednesday.
Is this a team that I would pick or the team I think that Dyche is going to pick?
Who knows, Joe? Who knows?
Just give us 11 names.
Well, to be fair, there aren't many more than 11 in the squad, are there, that fit. So, look, I think he perhaps errs on the side of caution with Branthwaite. He checked himself in the press conference yesterday, but he started off by suggesting that he was further behind than a fair few others. So, obviously, that means Michael Keane starts. Had a good game against Newcastle. Dyche has been very pleased with him this season so far. Coleman versus Young is an interesting one. It sounds like Coleman's in the running, but again, another player that you want to be careful about managing their minutes. And again, we know that the backup in Ashley Young is someone that Dyche has a lot of trust in. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Young and Keane in the back four. That's not me saying they're in the strongest back four, but that's necessarily what I do, but I wouldn't be surprised with them. And then I think that it probably goes, I mean, he continued with Newcastle, he started with Decore and Mangala, didn't he, and brought Gay off the bench. So that's right, isn't it? I think he may well do the same with that tomorrow. I think Gay starts in my first choice 11, but obviously he comes back from international duty, doesn't he? So maybe he'll have a mind on that. Maybe, Dyche might be pleased with elements of the performance against Newcastle. And then the rest probably picks itself, doesn't he? He probably plays Iliman Dye out left. He believes that he can play that role. McNeil in the middle, and then it's Harrison or Lundstrom on the right. I reckon he goes with Harrison, and then Dominic Calvert-Lewin up top.
And prediction?
I think Everton win. I think this might be a game that plays a little bit into Dyche's hands. I think that it's a game that Ipswich might come into feeling like it's a game that they need to win and should win, and if they get a little bit ahead of themselves, that's almost the type of scenario where I think Dyche can kind of work to his advantage. Dyche has been around in the Premier League for a long time, and he's very savvy at picking up the wins that he needs to for his teams. We've seen that with him at Everton. We saw it with him against Burnley. And I think he might be able to kind of play the circumstances here and just maybe... I don't think it'll be necessarily a kind of a Burnley last season design an ugly win, but I think he might be able to kind of get this group of players into with the additional experience that they have the additional Premier League experience as manager that he has. And I think with the pressure that I think might end up running on Ipswich tomorrow, I can just see Evan perhaps doing a bit of a number on Ipswich.
Do you agree?
Do we want my
Predictions? Well, predictions and team
so
selection.
2-0 to Everton, I'm saying.
Okay, all right,
2-0.
yeah. We'll be asked to do our team selector, so that I'll do the team that I think Deitch will pick here. Pickford, Young, Mikalenko, Keane, Tarkowski, Gay, Decore, McNeil, Harrison, and Dye, Calvert-Lewin. 1-0 Everton.
Okay. I think I'll come in with Mangala.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'll do. What'll happen, and like I said, I don't think you can either way for Harrison and Lindstrom, because obviously he had a good game against Leicester, didn't he, before he got taken off poor against Crystal Palace. So maybe he's better suited away Lindstrom at the moment. But I'm prediction wise, I just feel like it's just nailed on to be a draw. The way it is, that's just how I feel, and I'd be obviously very disappointed if we got beaten. The pressure will be just immediately back on.
Yeah.
Sean Dyche, unfortunately, like you said, it's got to be good results from the 2 away games of this and
This little
Southampton.
mini period, they can prevent a lot of problems from brewing if they get results in this next little run of fixtures. They can get ahead of the fixture list almost, can't they? And then it just takes the pressure off that difficult December.
Similar to last autumn, really, yeah.
And this was the period last year where they kind of came into it, wasn't it? I mean, the common refrain from those outside the Everton bubble was that the points deduction galvanised the club, and I, at the time, subscribed to this and still now say that actually the roots of the form that followed the deduction were actually laid weeks earlier, when in October they got the win against Bournemouth, and then they just started picking up form, didn't they? And they had a good draw against Brighton where they should have won, but unfortunately the last minute deflection at Goodison. Got that great win at Crystal Palace. The foundation, the platform was laid before the deduction. The deduction just probably maybe gave them that extra bit of impetus, probably that extra bit of spite that they needed, just to really hammer home some and chase after some ruthless victories. So hopefully we'll see something similar this season in terms of an autumn upturn rather than a points deduction.
I mean, I know timeline-wise and stats don't really matter, but we are obviously bordering on nearly a full year since Everton last won away from home. Won away from home away. So 16th of December. It's the longer it goes on, the worse it gets.
Yeah, that needs to change, because I think this being the first of this period, like we said, 5 potentially in isolation winnable games, but you need to start building that momentum, because for good or bad, Everton been streaky under Dyche, haven't they? Saving themselves with 3 wins in a week last year, finishing the season with 5 consecutive home games, but then obviously not winning at all between Christmas and Easter. So they have been notoriously streaky, good or bad. So let's hope it's the start of a good streak and setting those good examples.
Okay, well, we'll finish off, because I know the lads have got to get off, but just one question. We've just had a question from Dave Mack and Chris. Me and you were discussing it beforehand. So I think Dave's just asking, it was Graeme Sharp's birthday last week. What's your view on him returning to Goodison Park to watch matches before we move? What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, from a football perspective, he's an Everton legend, isn't he?
Absolutely.
And I think that, this is a club with a wonderful history, and we're celebrating a lot of that at the moment with the final season of Goodison Park. And it would be good to have as many people who have played such a pivotal role in it. I think it probably requires a degree of magnanimity from Sharp. I think that that was a difficult period of time. The final days of Lampard and everything that was happening around it above him. That Southampton match, and I think the club got a lot of things wrong. I think that one of the problems is with Sharp at the time is obviously he gave that interview, I think, to the Mirror, where he perhaps was a bit critical of the fans, or questioning the fans who were protesting. I felt a bit in isolation. I felt a bit sorry for him in that, because obviously as a journalist I read the 500 words and I kind of could see how maybe a passing comment within a much wider interview had been taken and become the main thrust of an interview, which he perhaps wasn't necessarily expecting. But I think we also have to acknowledge that it wasn't the first time that he'd perhaps questioned fans that were unhappy with what they were seeing at Everton. So, you know, I think a degree of recognition that the fans are incredibly important to Everton, the success of Everton Football Club, and have played a very important role in terms of Everton's Premier League survival over the last few years. And I would argue to say that the Everton supporters have played a more influential role in Everton's staying in the Premier League over the past 2 years than Everton's board have. And I think that's probably would warrant a little bit of recognition. But I think I think we would all like to see Bridges I can't speak on other people's behalf. I imagine we would all like to see Bridges rebuilt on this. There needs to be a willingness from both sides, I think.
Absolutely, well put. I mean, Chris, we were talking about it beforehand, weren't we, before we come in, and you actually revealed to me that Graeme Sharp was on your journalist course.
Yeah, you know, I've known Graeme for over 2 decades now. There's Tony Barrett was there as well, of course, former Echo man, now working at Liverpool FC. And yeah, before Graeme went on to, he was very serious about learning to become a journalist. His father was a journalist as well, and he was going about it the professional route. And then it just so happened, fate intervened, that Joe Parkinson left his position as fans liaison officer, and Graeme went to do that at the club. I'd known him anyway. So beyond that, I think it has to be on the right terms. For Graeme here, it's whether when Graeme's comfortable to come back, because I noticed that there'd been an online poll with this, and you know the vast majority of fans did want to see him back. They want him there, and they want to see him back at Everton. You're always going to get some, aren't you, who say no. I know there are people when I spoke to David Moyes recently, and we were delighted to get him in doing the Goodison Park My Home. Some people were still saying, "Well, we don't forgive David Moyes. You know, after he went to Manchester United, tried to take our players." Well, for me, I think you know that's football, and you could see how affectionately David Moyes spoke about Everton and what it meant to him. Okay, you're always going to get those dissenting voices, but I believe they are in the minority, however strong they might be. At the end of the day, no other living person has scored more goals for Everton than Graeme Sharp. He's part of the greatest team, which has brought the most joy to Evertonians in the 80s, and it's something that's really dear to him. He's obviously bruised by what's happened here, and he was part of he was a non-executive director, wasn't he, taken on by the club, so everyone's got to have their culpability as part of that. But I think it's a bit of a stretch to sort of suggest that all these great ills, and they are great ills, that have befallen Everton in recent seasons, you know, the lowest equivalent points total in the club's history, and the off-the-field chaos with the points deductions and all that. If you try and lay that directly at Graeme Sharp's door, I'm not sure how that stacks up. But I think everyone just wants to see him back at Goodison Park before it is too late, before the end of the season. And we'd love to get him in. We're getting so many of his great colleagues. I'm sure he'd be great, you know, as part of that, as the Goodison Park My Home series. I'd love to be in a position where Graeme can feel he's comfortable to attend the game at Goodison again, and be able to come and speak to us. I mean, that'd be ideal, I think.
Okay, thanks for that, lads. People are entitled to their opinion, and obviously there is going to be different opinions. Just remember that Graeme Sharp is still an Everton legend, and like you say, an absolute warrior of a goal scorer for the club in the past. Any final remarks then before you two lads head off to Ipswich?
I mean, if anybody has got any suggestions for what we do on a night or a morning in Ipswich, I think we'd be grateful, wouldn't we? So
yeah, get old ITFC and
you can watch it back.
Watch yourselves back.
That's it. Well, I mean, we've got probably 5 hours at least in the car, haven't we? So I mean, we could put it on and put it on the stereo, I think.
Just think of the content that you could produce if you just filmed yourselves driving.
Well, that's it. Yeah,
a bit like the trip.
Max and Paddy.
Which one's Max? Which one's Paddy?
The readers can decide.
Okay, all good stuff then. Well, follow Joe and Chris to Ipswich tomorrow for all the coverage on the Liverpool Echo website, and keep an eye out on YouTube for their post-match verdicts and post-match reactions, hopefully reacting to a win. And we will be back in podcast form on the YouTube channel, on Apple Podcasts on Monday as well. That is all for today's show. As always, give us a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and give us 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Joe Thomas and Chris Beesley, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.